December 20th, 1943. Berghof, Bavaria. Snow falls silently over the Bavarian Alps, coating the pines and peaks outside Adolf Hitler's mountain retreat in a pristine white. Inside, the warmth of the Great Hall contrasts with the icy cold beyond the glass. Cigarette smoke hangs thick in the air. Maps of Europe cover the long oak table, lines of red and blue marking fronts and divisions stretching from the Atlantic to the Russian steppe. Around the table sit the men who command the might of the Third Reich: Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel, General Alfred Jodl, Hermann Göring, and Albert Speer. They are relaxed, confident, even arrogant. Hitler stands at the head, his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze fixed on a large map of northern France pinned to the wall. The coastlines are dotted with black markers, each one representing a fortress of the Atlantic Wall, the Atlantic Wall.
Our defenses are impregnable, Keitel reports proudly. From Calais to Normandy, every mile of coast is fortified. The British and Americans will never dare to cross. Göring, puffing on his cigar, laughs. The Americans don't have the stomach for a real fight. They prefer to bomb from 20,000 feet and run home. Hitler's lips curl into a faint smile. The Western powers are weak, he says quietly. They will never risk another invasion across the Channel. Not after Dunkirk. Laughter ripples through the room. To them, the idea of a large-scale Allied landing in France seems absurd, an act of desperation from nations long past their prime. They underestimate the Allies not because of ignorance, but because of pride. The Wehrmacht had steamrolled across Europe in 3 short years. France had fallen in 6 weeks. The Luftwaffe had darkened the skies over London. The Reich was at its zenith, and its leaders believed themselves untouchable. Outside, the snow continues to fall, soft, steady, indifferent. But beneath that tranquil surface, preparations are already underway across the Channel for something that will shatter the illusion of German invincibility forever. Meanwhile, in London, England, General Dwight D. Eisenhower stands in a dimly lit operations room, staring at a wall of maps that mirror those in Hitler's mountain fortress. Red strings connect beaches to airfields, ports to supply lines, and divisions to landing zones. Around him, British and American officers, men like General Bernard Montgomery and Admiral Bertram Ramsay, speak in hushed tones, their words heavy with the weight of history. Eisenhower places his hand on the map, tracing the coastline of Normandy with his finger. "Gentlemen," he says quietly, "this is where the tide will turn. The world's watching. We can't afford to fail." Outside, the streets of London are darkened by blackout curtains, the city still haunted by the memories of the Blitz. Yet in every shadowed alley, every train yard and harbor, the Allied war machine hums to life. Convoys of tanks, artillery, and trucks roll through the night. Men in olive drab and khaki prepare their weapons, their uniforms, their nerves. They don't yet know it, but in 6 months' time, they'll be part of the largest amphibious invasion in history. Back in Berghof, Hitler looks over the snowy horizon, his confidence unshaken. "The English will bark," he mutters to his generals, "but they will not bite." The men around him nod. They laugh, they drink, and somewhere across the Channel, Eisenhower's quiet voice breaks through the hum of the war room. "They will bite all right, and when they do, it'll be the beginning of the end. The countdown to D-Day has begun." Spring 1944, southern England. A damp fog rolls in from the Channel, swallowing the coastline in gray. Along the narrow roads of the English countryside, endless columns of trucks rumble towards secret assembly points. Their tarps are drawn tight, concealing men, tanks, and equipment beneath. To any passerby, it looks like the routine shuffling of troops. But the truth is far from ordinary. Operation Overlord, the greatest invasion ever conceived, is now in motion. But before the Allies can strike, they must first deceive. At an airfield outside Dover, inflatable tanks, painted and riveted to look real, stand in perfect formation. Canvas aircraft, shaped from wood and wire, are arranged neatly beside dummy hangars. At first glance, it's a formidable army poised for invasion. But it's all a lie. The operation is called Fortitude South. Its purpose, to convince Hitler that the Allies plan to invade at Pas-de-Calais, not Normandy. The mastermind of this illusion is British intelligence, MI5 and the double-cross system, an intricate network of double agents feeding the Germans precisely what they expect to hear. Among them is Juan Pujol Garcia, codenamed Garbo, a Spanish double agent. Garbo has convinced the Abwehr, the German intelligence agency, that he commands a vast spy ring across Britain. In reality, he's sitting in a small London office, typing reports that the Germans will believe without question. His words shape the enemy's expectations. Calais is the invasion point. Normandy is a feint. Every step, every deception is designed to lull Hitler into complacency. And it works. In Berlin, Hitler's intelligence reports confirm his beliefs. The Allied buildup across from Calais is massive, far too large to ignore. He orders Rommel, his desert fox, to reinforce northern France. Meanwhile, in Normandy, the defenses remain comparatively thin, manned by divisions that are under-equipped and exhausted. May 1944, La Roche-Guyon, France. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel steps out onto the terrace of his chateau headquarters overlooking the Seine. The spring air is heavy with rain and the distant rumble of artillery practice. He scans the horizon, frowning. The calm is deceptive, and Rommel senses it. He turns to his aide. "If I were the enemy, I wouldn't go where we expect him to. I'd go where we're weakest." His aide hesitates. "Normandy, sir?" Rommel nods grimly. "Yes, Berlin won't listen. They think they know better." He's right. While Hitler sleeps late into the mornings at the Berghof, his generals debate endlessly over where the Allies will strike. The Führer remains convinced: Calais. Rommel, the practical soldier, begins strengthening defenses in Normandy anyway, laying mines, building obstacles, flooding fields. But even he cannot prepare for what's coming. Back in England, the invasion force grows by the day. Over 150,000 men, Americans, British, Canadians, and Free French, train relentlessly in the South. They practice amphibious landings on English beaches, load and reload landing craft, coordinate paratrooper drops, and rehearse under the constant roar of aircraft engines. June 1st, 1944. Portsmouth Harbor. Rows of ships stretch as far as the eye can see. Battleships, destroyers, transports, and landing craft. The air smells of oil and salt. Soldiers lounge on the decks, some playing cards, others writing letters home. The tension is palpable, unspoken. General Eisenhower walks among them quietly, offering nods and words of encouragement. His presence alone steadies nerves. It's not the size of the army that counts. He tells one young private, "It's the heart that fights within it." That same night, at Southwick House, Eisenhower and his commanders gather one last time. The decision must be made. The weather is turning. Winds batter the channel. Waves rise high. Some argue to delay. Others insist it's now or never. Meteorologist Group Captain James Stagg enters the room. Rain still dripping from his coat. "There'll be a break in the storm on the morning of June 6th, he says. "A 36-hour window. After that, nothing for weeks." Eisenhower looks down at the map. Thousands of ships, thousands of men, and the hope of the free world rest on this call. He takes a breath. All right, he says softly. We go. Outside in the harbor, the ships wait like sleeping giants. And somewhere across the channel, German soldiers drink and smoke in their bunkers, unaware that within 72 hours, the tide of history will crash upon them. June 5th, 1944. 2300 hours. Southern England. The rain has finally eased. A pale moon breaks through the clouds, casting a silvery light over rows of paratroopers assembling on airfields across southern England. The ground vibrates with the low hum of aircraft engines. C-47 Dakotas lined wingtip to wingtip, their fuselages marked with bold black and white invasion stripes. The men of the 101st and 82nd Airborne Divisions check their equipment in silence. Riggers tighten harnesses, adjust parachute straps, and slap shoulders for luck. The scent of fuel, sweat, and leather fills the cool night air. Lieutenant Dick Winters of Easy Company kneels beside his men, unfolding a small map under the glow of a flashlight. His voice is calm but firm. We land here, he says, tracing the hedgerows of Normandy with his finger. Our job is to take the causeways and hold them. No matter what happens, we stick together. Nearby, chaplains move among the troops, offering quiet prayers and blessings. Some men laugh nervously. Others stare into the distance, lost in thought. In a hangar, General Dwight D. Eisenhower walks slowly down a line of paratroopers dressed in full gear, helmets, packs, rifles, and faces blackened with charcoal. He stops before one group and asks, "How do you feel, boys?" A sergeant grins. "Just give us the go, sir." Eisenhower smiles faintly. "Well," he says, "that's what we're here for." He shakes a few hands, his face composed but weary. Behind his calm demeanor, he carries the full weight of command, the knowledge that by this time tomorrow, thousands may be dead. As midnight approaches, the first aircraft thunder down the runways. One by one, the Dakotas lift into the night, their navigation lights blinking faintly through the low clouds. The invasion has begun. Over the English Channel, 1 a.m. Waves roll black beneath the airborne armada. Inside the planes, paratroopers sit shoulder to shoulder in silence, engines roaring so loud they can barely hear their own thoughts. A red light glows above the jump door. Steady, unblinking. The men grip their static lines. The aircraft shudders as anti-aircraft fire flashes below. Tracers streak upward through the clouds like red comets. 30 seconds, the jumpmaster shouts. The light turns green. Go, go, go! One by one, they leap into darkness. The cold air tears at their faces. For a few seconds, there's nothing but wind and falling. And then, the canopy snaps open with a violent jolt. The sky above Normandy fills with thousands of parachutes, drifting like pale ghosts through the night. Below them, the land burns. Farms, villages, flak bursts lighting the horizon. Some land in the right zones, others are scattered miles off course. Many drown in flooded fields or are cut down before they even reach the ground. But others, through chaos and confusion, gather and fight. Small groups form, led by sergeants and lieutenants who've trained for this moment. They capture bridges, ambush convoys, and sow chaos deep behind German lines. Meanwhile, 3:30 a.m., on the Channel, the sea is alive. Over 5,000 ships, warships, transports, landing craft plow through choppy waves toward France. Destroyers cut the surf ahead, their wakes glowing faintly in the moonlight. The horizon is endless steel and motion. Sailors man their posts, soldiers sleep on the decks, and officers scan the coast through binoculars. When one landing craft, A young British lieutenant checks his watch. 3 hours, he mutters. 3 hours until hell. The closer they get, the more the air smells of salt and diesel, the more the reality sets in. For many of these men, this will be their first battle and their last. Across the channel, German radar stations pick up echoes on their screens. Operators in bunkers near Cherbourg frown and call it in. Massive formation heading toward Normandy, one reports. But higher command, still convinced by the deception of Operation Fortitude, dismisses it. It's a diversion, they say. The real invasion will come at Calais. At his headquarters in Belgium, Field Marshal von Rundstedt sleeps soundly. Rommel is hundreds of miles away in Germany, visiting his wife for her birthday. Even Hitler is asleep at Berghof. No one has the authority or the nerve to wake him. As dawn approaches, the horizon begins to glow. And for the soldiers packed into landing craft, now surging toward the beaches of Normandy, the long night gives way to the longest day in history. June 6th, 1944, 05:20 hours, Normandy coast, France. The first light of dawn creeps over the channel, painting the waves in silver and gray. The air smells of salt and cordite. The men aboard the landing craft crouch low as spray lashes their faces. Engines roar. Steel hulls grind against the water. Overhead, the thunder of naval guns erupts from the Allied fleet. Battleships like USS Texas, HMS Warspite, and USS Nevada unleash a relentless barrage on the French coastline. Each shell screams overhead before exploding in fountains of fire and earth. The cliffs tremble. German bunkers vanish in clouds of smoke. The entire shoreline seems to burn. But the Germans are not broken. Inside the pillboxes and concrete casemates, the defenders brace themselves. MG-42s are loaded. Ammunition belts clatter into place. Young conscripts and hardened veterans alike grip their weapons, eyes wide, hearts hammering. One German sergeant mutters, "Gott mit uns," God with us. At 6:30, the ramps drop. Omaha Beach. The first wave of American soldiers from the 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions step into waist-deep water. The cold shocks their bodies. Machine gun fire tears through the air instantly, cutting men down before they can even move. Bullets hiss and snap, hitting steel helmets and punching holes through packs. Mortar shells explode among the landing craft, flipping them like toys. Lieutenant John Spaulding of the 116th Infantry shouts over the chaos, "Get off the beach! Move forward!" But the sea is red, and the sand offers no cover. Men press themselves behind steel obstacles and wrecked vehicles, praying for a pause that never comes. Across the beach, medics crawl through the surf, dragging the wounded to safety. Engineers attempt to clear mines and wire under fire, many killed before they can set their charges. For hours, the tide brings in bodies and wreckage. The beach is a killing ground. At one command post offshore, General Omar Bradley watches through binoculars. His face is pale. "We're losing the beach," he says quietly to his staff. They're pinned down. The radio crackles with frantic reports. Units disorganized, casualties high. There's talk of pulling back. But the tide of war does not allow retreat. And then, through the chaos, small groups begin to move.
Lieutenant John Spaulding of the 116th Infantry shouts over the chaos, "Get off the beach! Move forward!" But the sea is red, and the sand offers no cover. Men press themselves behind steel obstacles and wrecked vehicles, praying for a pause that never comes. Across the beach, medics crawl through the surf, dragging the wounded to safety. Engineers attempt to clear mines and wire under fire, many killed before they can set their charges. For hours, the tide brings in bodies and wreckage. The beach is a killing ground. At one command post offshore, General Omar Bradley watches through binoculars. His face is pale. "We're losing the beach," he says quietly to his staff. They're pinned down. The radio crackles with frantic reports. Units disorganized, casualties high. There's talk of pulling back, but the tide of war does not allow retreat. And then, through the chaos, small groups begin to move. A handful of men, led by Sergeant Frank Perigori, find a gap in the wire. Others follow, crawling, running, throwing grenades into bunkers, climbing the bluffs, one agonizing foot at a time. Naval gunners spot their signals and shift fire inland. Slowly, painfully, the momentum changes. By late morning, sections of Omaha are in Allied hands. Smoke drifts across the beach like fog. The cries of the wounded mix with the rumble of tanks landing from later waves. Meanwhile, to the east, Sword, Juno, and Gold beaches roar to life under the assault of British and Canadian forces. Churchill tanks, massive and lumbering, grind through the surf, their flamethrowers clearing nests of resistance. The British 3rd Division pushes inland, securing bridges and villages, linking with commandos led by Lord Lovett. Piper Bill Millen, playing his bagpipes amidst the chaos, becomes a legend. At Utah Beach, the Americans fare better. General Theodore Roosevelt Jr., walking with a cane, steps onto the sand and realizes they've landed 2,000 yards off target. He looks around, grins, and says, "We'll start the war from right here." His calm inspires everyone around him. Within hours, Utah is secure. The Germans are reeling. Field reports pour into the headquarters of the 7th Army. Confusion reigns. Communication lines are shattered, and units are cut off. But in Berlin, Hitler still sleeps. His staff refuses to wake him without confirmation that this is the real invasion. When he finally rises, near 10 a.m., he is furious, convinced that Normandy is merely a diversion. He orders the panzer divisions to hold their positions near Calais. The deception of Operation Fortitude has worked perfectly. By noon, over 100,000 Allied troops are ashore. Airborne units link up with the beachheads, capturing key crossroads and bridges. The beaches of Normandy are secure, but at a terrible cost. On Omaha alone, nearly 2,000 Americans are dead. The sand is littered with rifles, helmets, and the quiet bodies of men who never made it past the surf. The sea that morning had carried them to destiny. Now, by dusk, it carries back their sacrifice. But the beaches are in Allied hands, and the Reich's dream of invincibility, once so certain in Hitler's mountain hall, has begun to crumble. The West has returned to Europe, and the road to Berlin has just opened. June 6, 1944, late afternoon. La Roche-Guyon, France. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel's staff car skids to a stop on the cobblestones outside his chateau headquarters. The air is thick with static from the radio room inside, transmissions overlapping, desperate voices calling for reinforcements. Rommel storms through the doorway, still in his traveling coat, his face pale but resolute. "What's the situation?" he demands. A young communications officer salutes sharply. "Sir, Allied forces have landed. 5 beaches, from Cherbourg to Caen. Paratroopers behind our lines. It's chaos." Rommel grips the edge of the map table. "And where are the panzers?" "Still under OKW authority, sir. Hitler hasn't released them." Rommel's expression hardens. "Then we've lost the coast." He had warned them. He'd begged for the panzer divisions to be stationed near the beaches, ready to counterattack within hours of an invasion. But Berlin, confident in its illusion of the Atlantic Wall, had insisted the armor stay inland. The result was exactly what Rommel had feared, a delayed response that could not stop the flood once it began. He stares down at the map, at the pins marking Omaha, Gold, Sword, Juno, and Utah. This is the beginning of the end, he mutters. Back in Normandy, smoke rolls across the French countryside. Villages burn. The thunder of artillery shakes the earth. Allied soldiers push inland through hedgerows so dense they might as well be walls. German snipers lurk among the leaves. Ambushes erupt in the narrow lanes. Every field, every farm is a battlefield. The 101st Airborne fights to hold Carentan. The British 6th Airborne defends the Pegasus Bridge. Canadian troops clash at Courcelles and Bernières-sur-Mer. The fighting is brutal, close, personal. But for the first time in years, the German army is on the defensive in Western Europe. At a forward observation post near Caen, Captain Friedrich Lang watches the Allied bombardment through his binoculars. "They just keep coming," he whispers to his adjutant. "It's as if the sea itself turned against us. Everywhere he looks, the horizon burns. Allied ships fire continuously, their shells lighting up the dusk. Above them, waves of bombers cross the sky in perfect formation, Lancasters, B-24s, and B-17s, dropping ton after ton of explosives on rail lines, roads, and artillery positions. The Luftwaffe, once the pride of the Reich, is nearly absent. Most of its strength has been spent defending the homeland from Allied bombers. Over Normandy, only a few fighters appear, and they are quickly chased away by Spitfires and Mustangs. That night, Hitler convenes a meeting at his headquarters in Rastenburg. The mood is tense. Maps are spread out across the table. Phones ring incessantly. Keitel insists the main invasion is still to come at Calais. Jodl nods in agreement, fearing the Führer's wrath more than defeat itself. Hitler slams his fist on the table. "Then let them come. We will crush them here," he shouts, his face red with fury. "My panzers will throw them back into the sea." But his words ring hollow. The tide has already turned, and even he knows it. The room falls silent, except for the scratching of pencils and the distant hum of the radio. June 7th, 1944. The French countryside. In the small town of Sainte-Mère-Église, paratroopers of the 82nd Airborne raise an American flag over the church square, the first liberated town in France. Villagers emerge cautiously from their homes, tears in their eyes. An old woman presses bread into a soldier's hands, whispering, "Merci." Every mile gained costs blood, yet each one brings the Allies closer to their goal, to push the Germans out of France and break open Fortress Europe. At sea, fresh divisions continue to arrive: men, tanks, supplies. By the end of the second day, over 150,000 Allied troops are ashore. The Atlantic Wall, once called impenetrable, has been breached. And deep in the bunkers along the coast, German officers stare at the ruins around them, stunned. The arrogance that once filled Hitler's halls, the laughter, the certainty, has turned to silence. Rommel writes in his field report that evening, "The enemy's air superiority is overwhelming. Our forces are cut off. Unless the Führer acts decisively, this war in the West is lost." But Hitler will not act decisively. He will cling to delusion, to the myth of his unbreakable Reich, even as it crumbles beneath his feet. The invasion that began in the dawn surf of Normandy is no longer a single battle. It is the opening chapter of the end. The laughter of Nazi leaders has turned to disbelief, then to fear, and finally to the grim realization that the war they began can no longer be won. For the first time, the walls of Europe are cracking, and through those cracks, freedom begins to pour in. June 8, 1944, near Saint-Lô, Normandy, a gray dawn settles over the shattered fields. Smoke lingers in the air, thick as fog, carrying the scent of burning oil and cordite. German soldiers crouch in the ditches beside what remains of the Caen road, mud-soaked, exhausted, and dazed by the relentless pounding from the Allied guns. The once proud Wehrmacht, masters of blitzkrieg, now find themselves pinned, paralyzed, and on the run. Across the fields, the faint hum of engines grows louder. The Allies are moving again. Sherman's, Cromwell's, and Churchill tanks advance behind lines of infantry. Each movement is deliberate, cautious. Every hedgerow hides a sniper. Every farmhouse could conceal a machine gun nest. In one crater, Oberleutnant Hans Becker wipes soot from his face and stares toward the horizon. "Where are our panzers?" he mutters. His adjutant shakes his head. Stuck in reserve, Hitler won't release them. That sentence, spoken in disbelief, echoes across the front. Rommel and von Rundstedt both plead with Berlin to unleash their armored divisions before the Allies can consolidate their beachhead. But in the Wolf's Lair, Hitler refuses to believe Normandy is the real invasion. He is convinced, utterly and completely, that the main attack will come at Calais. And so, the 1st SS Panzer Division Leibstandarte, the 2nd Panzer Division, and the mighty Panzer-Lehr Division remain idle, positioned to counter a phantom invasion that will never arrive. By the time they are finally released, 2 days too late, the Allies have already built their bridgeheads, established supply lines, and landed more than 300,000 troops. The window to crush the invasion has closed. In Berlin, June 10, 1944, the atmosphere in Hitler's headquarters is suffocating. Maps are covered in red markers, each one representing an Allied gain. The air smells of cigarette smoke and anxiety. General Jodl reads out the latest report. Enemy troops have linked the beachheads. Caen is under assault. Cherbourg is threatened. Hitler leans back in his chair, eyes vacant. "No," he says quietly. "It's a diversion. It has to be. Patton is in England. He will strike at Calais." The generals exchange glances. None dare to contradict him. But outside those walls, reality speaks louder than orders. In the fields of Normandy, Panzer-Lehr finally makes contact. Their tanks, adorned with the black cross of the Wehrmacht, move like iron beasts through the hedgerows. But Allied fighter bombers are waiting. Typhoons and thunderbolts swoop down from the clouds, their rockets screaming toward the columns below. The explosions tear through the ranks. Vehicles erupt in flame. Crews leap for cover. And within minutes, the counterattack becomes a massacre. Rommel, inspecting the aftermath days later, can scarcely hide his despair. "The war is lost if this continues," he tells his aide. "Our men fight bravely, but they fight in a storm we cannot control." June 12, 1944, Omaha Beach. The once bloodied shoreline is now a city of men and machines. Bulldozers rumble across the sand, clearing wreckage and digging trenches. Engineers construct makeshift piers, mulberry harbors, vast floating docks that stretch into the sea. Liberty ships unload supplies in endless waves: crates, fuel, ammunition, food, tanks, and medical equipment. From above, it looks like an anthill made of steel and willpower. General Eisenhower surveys the growing army, his expression a mix of relief and resolve. "We're in," he says simply. "Now we fight our way out." Back in Germany, Goebbels' propaganda machine whirls to life, insisting that the Allied landings have failed, that the enemy is trapped between the sea and the Wehrmacht. But the truth cannot be hidden forever. Letters from the front tell a different story, of bombardments that never cease, of skies filled with enemy aircraft, of soldiers fighting without fuel or reinforcements. Morale begins to crack. The same officers who once boasted that the Atlantic Wall was invincible now whisper their doubts. The laughter that once filled Hitler's war councils has faded into silence. By late June, the Allies have captured Cherbourg. Caen burns under constant assault. The Americans push inland toward St. Lo, while the British and Canadians grind forward against the elite panzer units. Every day, more troops land. Every night, the German lines grow thinner. For years, The Wehrmacht had been the unstoppable force of Europe. But here, in the hedgerows of Normandy, the tide has reversed. The Allies are no longer defending, they are advancing. And for the first time since 1939, the Germans are retreating. July 7, 1944, Caen, Normandy. The city is an inferno. Allied artillery shells whistle overhead before slamming into stone buildings, sending showers of debris into the streets. The once beautiful French town, known for its Gothic church and medieval charm, now looks like a scar on the earth, a ruin of dust and fire. In the basement of a shattered cafe, a handful of German soldiers cling to what's left of their positions. A sergeant in his early 20s, face smeared with soot, grips his MP40 and mutters prayers under his breath. Outside, the rumble of tanks grows louder, punctuated by the distinct clatter of British rifles. The radio crackles, a voice from division command, hold at all costs. But all costs has already been paid. The 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend, made up of fanatical teenage soldiers, has been decimated. Entire companies have vanished beneath Allied firepower, and the once vaunted Luftwaffe? It's nowhere to be seen. Allied fighters dominate the skies, bombing supply convoys and strafing any German movement that dares to appear in daylight. Across the front, the German army bleeds slowly, painfully. Rommel, commanding Army Group B, watches the situation unravel. He drives from one sector to another, urging his men to hold, but what he sees fills him with dread. Ammunition running low, lines collapsing, morale shattered. "We cannot win this war anymore," he confides to his aide, Captain Lang. "Our only hope is to end it before the entire country burns." But in Berlin, hope is a crime. July 15th, 1944. The Wolf's Lair, East Prussia. Inside the heavily guarded bunker, Hitler's temper boils. His generals stand stiffly at attention as he screams at a map spread before him. The Western Front must not retreat, not one step back, he bellows, his hand trembling. They will hold, or die. Field Marshal Keitel nods obediently. Jodl avoids eye contact. Everyone in the room knows the truth. The front is collapsing, inch by inch. Rommel, miles away, sends a final plea through coded channels. Request permission to withdraw to defensible positions east of the Seine. Hitler's answer is curt and final. Denied. Then, fate intervenes. On July 17th, Rommel's staff car is strafed by Allied aircraft near Livorno. Bullets shatter the windshield. The car careens off the road and crashes into a tree. Rommel is thrown clear, his skull fractured, his war effectively over. Germany loses its most respected commander in the West, and with him, any chance of a coherent defense. In the following days, whispers begin spreading through the ranks. Rommel was against the Führer. Some say he would have joined the conspirators in the plot to kill Hitler, the plot that will erupt only 3 days later. July 20th, 1944. The Wolf's Lair. A briefcase bomb explodes beneath a wooden conference table. Dust, smoke, and screams fill the room. When it clears, Hitler is alive, shaken but alive. The coup collapses within hours. The conspirators are hunted, tortured, and executed. Among those implicated, Field Marshal Rommel. Forced to choose between public disgrace or suicide, he takes poison on October 14th. His death is announced as a heroic accident. By then, the Normandy front is already beyond saving. August 1st, 1944, near St. Lo, Operation Cobra begins. American forces under General Omar Bradley unleash a hurricane of bombs. B-17s, B-24s, and fighter bombers pummel German positions in a 30-minute aerial assault. The ground trembles, the air turns black, and entire German divisions vanish in smoke. When the dust settles, the American armor surges through the gap. Patton's Third Army roars forward like lightning, encircling retreating German troops. Roads clog with burning trucks, abandoned artillery, and bodies. What was once a front line becomes a slaughter. Within days, the phallus pocket closes. 50,000 German soldiers are trapped, bombed, and annihilated. Survivors crawl through fields strewn with dead horses and shattered tanks. The stench of death fills the valley. One German officer writes in his diary, "This is the end of the army that once conquered France. We are now the hunted." And so it is. The myth of German invincibility dies in Normandy. In Berlin, Goebbels records another speech for the radio, his voice trembling with false confidence. "Our forces are regrouping. The Western invasion will be repelled." But the truth is clear. The laughter that once filled the Reich's war rooms has been replaced with silence. The Allies are breaking through France. The road to Paris lies open. The road to Germany lies beyond it. August 19th, 1944. Paris, France. The streets are alive again. But this time, not with the thunder of German boots. Allied tanks roll through the boulevards, their treads crushing the rubble of 4 years of occupation. Civilians cheer from windows draped with tricolor flags. Bells ring from the towers of Notre Dame, echoing through the smoke-filled air. For 4 long years, Paris had endured humiliation and fear under Nazi rule. But now, as General Philippe Leclerc's 2nd Armored Division enters the city, the dream of liberation finally becomes real. In the shadows of the Arc de Triomphe, resistance fighters, men and women who once fought with pistols and Molotovs, now stand alongside American and French soldiers. Their uniforms don't match. Their weapons are a mix of scavenged rifles and captured MP-40s. But their unity is absolute. As German forces retreat from the city, a small group of diehards tries to hold the Hôtel de Ville. Machine gun fire rattles across the Seine. Then, in the distance, a white flag rises. By the time General Charles de Gaulle marches down the Champs-Élysées, the war in France is effectively over. The liberation of Paris electrifies the world and terrifies Berlin. August 25, 1944. Wolfslair, East Prussia. Hitler's face is pale, his hands trembling. He slams his fist on the table, scattering pencils and reports. "They let Paris fall," he screams at his staff. "They should have burned it. They should have reduced it to ash." Keibel says nothing. Jodl stares at the floor. Goebbels, ever the propagandist, tries to twist the moment into a warning. "Mein Führer, the French people's celebration will not last. The Allies will soon tear themselves apart. Americans, British, Russians, their alliance is fragile." Hitler's eyes narrow. "Then we will make them bleed before they reach our borders." But deep down, even he feels it, a cold certainty creeping into his bones. The Reich is dying. September 1944. Northern France and Belgium. The Allied armies advance like an unstoppable tide. Patton's tanks thunder eastward. Montgomery's forces push toward Belgium. And Eisenhower coordinates an army of more than 2 million men across a 600-mile front. German defenses fall one after another. The Siegfried Line, the last major defensive belt before the German border, looms ahead. But the Wehrmacht that once terrified Europe is now a shadow of itself. Teenagers and old men fill its ranks, armed with outdated rifles and promises of total war. Still, the German people cling to hope, nourished by propaganda. Posters proclaim victory or death. Radios blare Goebbels' voice, assuring them the miracle weapons will soon turn the tide. Those weapons, the V-1 and V-2 rockets, scream across the sky, striking London and Antwerp. They are terrifying, yes, but strategically meaningless. They cannot stop the Allied advance. In Berlin, Hitler retreats into fantasy. He orders counterattacks that no longer exist. Divisions that are nothing but names on a map. His generals whisper in private, the Führer has lost touch with reality. Meanwhile, in the field, Allied soldiers witness the collapse firsthand. An American lieutenant near Aachen writes in his diary, "They told us the Germans would fight to the last man, but what I see are boys in uniform, trembling, surrendering, with tears in their eyes. Their officers are gone, their spirit is gone. It's over, they just don't know it yet. October 1944, Aachen, Germany. The first German city falls. Its streets are reduced to rubble after weeks of brutal house-to-house combat. The once proud citizens of the Reich flee or hide in cellars as Allied artillery pounds the skyline. To the Allies, Aachen is symbolic, the gateway to Germany, the first crack in Hitler's fortress. To the Germans, it's an omen. In the ruins of the city hall, a captured German major looks at his captors and mutters, "If Aachen has fallen, Berlin will follow." His words prove prophetic. But before that final act, the Reich will make one last desperate gamble, a counterattack meant to shatter Allied morale, divide their armies, and reclaim the initiative. The plan is bold, reckless, delusional. It will become known to history as the Battle of the Bulge. December 16th, 1944, Ardennes Forest, Belgium. The morning is eerily quiet. A thick blanket of fog rolls through the snow-covered pines, muffling every sound. Allied soldiers, cold, exhausted, and believing the war is nearly won, huddle around small fires. Some sip from tin cups of lukewarm coffee. Others write letters home. The front has been calm for weeks, too calm. Then, at precisely 5:30 a.m., the silence is shattered. Thousands of German artillery guns roar to life. Shells scream overhead, tearing through the forest and slamming into Allied positions. In minutes, the fog is replaced by fire and thunder. Trees are ripped apart. Men dive for cover. Communications lines are obliterated. From the haze, the German army emerges, tanks, armored vehicles, and infantry pushing forward in perfect coordination. The 6th Panzer Army, under SS General Sepp Dietrich, surges toward the American lines. It's a massive counteroffensive, planned by Hitler himself. The goal: divide the Allied front, capture the port of Antwerp, and force the Western Allies to sue for peace. In his underground bunker in the Eifel Mountains, Hitler watches the operation unfold on a map. His eyes gleam with the same manic conviction that had once driven him across Europe. "They think we are finished," he growls. "But they will see. The German spirit cannot be crushed." The attack catches the Allies completely off guard. In the first 48 hours, American positions crumble. Entire battalions are cut off or overrun. The German spearhead drives deep into the Ardennes, forming a massive bulge in the Allied lines. Hence the name history will give this desperate campaign. December 19th, 1944, Bastogne, Belgium. The small Belgian town becomes the epicenter of the storm. The U.S. 101st Airborne Division, under Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, is surrounded by German forces. Supplies run low. The temperature plunges below freezing. Wounded men lie in cellars, wrapped in blankets, their breath visible in the cold air. A German envoy arrives under a white flag, delivering a written demand for surrender. McAuliffe reads the message, chuckles, and scribbles his reply, "Nuts." The envoy stares at the note, confused. When the translation reaches German command, it causes both frustration and disbelief. The Americans are defiant even in the face of annihilation. That defiance becomes legend. December 23rd. The weather clears, the skies open, and the long-awaited roar of Allied aircraft fills the air. Waves of P-47 Thunderbolts and B-26 Marauders descend on the German columns, strafing roads and bombing fuel convoys. The snow turns black with smoke. German armor begins to run dry. The panzer divisions, designed for lightning war, grind to a halt. The Allies counterattack. By January 1945, the offensive collapses entirely. The once mighty Wehrmacht has exhausted its last reserves of men, fuel, and hope. The Bulge, instead of breaking the Allies, breaks Germany. In Berlin, Hitler's rage knows no bounds. He blames his generals, his soldiers, the weather, everyone but himself. "They failed me," he shouts, pounding the table. "Cowards, traitors." But no amount of shouting can change what's already certain. The last German offensive in the West has failed. The road to the Rhine and to Germany's heartland lies open. January 1945. The Ardennes forest. Allied patrols move through the quiet, frozen woods. The ground is littered with burned-out tanks and bodies half buried in snow. A lone German helmet rests atop a rifle stuck in the earth, a silent grave marker for an army that no longer exists. One American private, walking through the wreckage, murmurs to his comrade, "They threw everything they had left at us, and it still wasn't enough." And that's the truth. The laughter that once echoed in Hitler's mountain halls is gone now, replaced by the distant thunder of artillery drawing ever closer to Berlin. The Western Allies are advancing from one side. The Red Army is closing from the other. For the Reich, there is no way out, but the final chapter will be the bloodiest of all. April 16th, 1945. Berlin, Germany. The city is a shattered skeleton. Smoke rises from burning buildings, and rubble chokes the streets where tanks once rolled with impunity. Sirens wail intermittently, warning of artillery strikes from the Soviets advancing through the eastern districts. Berlin, the heart of Hitler's empire, is now a battlefield. Inside the Führer bunker, the atmosphere is suffocating. Hitler, gaunt and pale, moves like a shadow along the corridors, clutching his cane. Around him, generals and aides scurry, their faces masks of exhaustion and fear. Reports pile in. The Soviets are within a few miles. The Western Allies have crossed the Rhine. Supplies have vanished. Communication lines are in chaos. Even the propaganda minister, Joseph Goebbels, cannot spin a narrative of victory. The war that once seemed invincible is collapsing at every front. Hitler, who once mocked the Allies' ability to land in France, now realizes the full scale of their power and resilience. The irony is bitter. Those he laughed at, underestimated, and dismissed have brought his empire to its knees. April 20th, 1945. Berlin streets. Soviet artillery booms like thunder. The ground trembles under the weight of tanks and trucks. Red Army soldiers advance cautiously, clearing buildings room by room, encountering pockets of desperate German resistance, men and boys too indoctrinated to surrender. Smoke and ash fill the air, a grim haze that blurs the line between sky and city. In the chaos, Hitler retreats to his private quarters. Maps litter the floor, showing the relentless advance of the Allies and Soviets alike. For hours, he writes, dictates, and contemplates. The arrogance and laughter that once filled the halls of the Reich are gone, replaced by silence and inevitability. By the early hours of April 30th, Hitler is dead by his own hand. His Reich, built on tyranny and mockery of the free world, begins its final descent into history. The generals who once conspired, the soldiers who once laughed at resistance, now face the consequences of underestimating a coalition of nations determined to end their domination. May 2nd, 1945. Berlin. The city surrenders to Soviet forces. The streets, once echoing with marching boots and Nazi salutes, are filled with the quiet hum of occupation and the solemn sounds of victory, mixed with grief. Survivors, both civilian and military, emerge from basements and shelters, blinking in the gray dawn. Meanwhile, Western Allied forces sweep through the rest of Germany. Concentration camps are liberated, prisoners freed, and the scale of Nazi atrocities finally revealed in stark, undeniable reality. Hitler's laughter, his overconfidence, and the mockery of Allied resistance have been silenced forever by courage, planning, and perseverance. May 8, 1945. Across Europe, the radio crackles with a single announcement, VE Day. The war in Europe is over. Celebrations erupt in cities from London to Paris to New York. Soldiers, civilians, and survivors embrace, cry, and cheer. And yet, for those who fought on the front lines, there is a sober understanding. Victory came not from luck, but from relentless determination, strategic brilliance, and the refusal of the Allies to be underestimated. The Third Reich, once so confident in its power and mocking of any opposition, is gone. Hitler and his generals, who laughed at the Western Allies, are now remembered as symbols of hubris and failure. The lessons of D-Day and the subsequent campaigns reverberate through history. Arrogance underestimates courage, overconfidence ignores strategy, and tyranny cannot withstand united resistance. The world has changed. The Allies prove that even the most entrenched power can be challenged and defeated when resilience, planning, and unity meet tyranny head-on. The laughter has ended. The reckoning is complete.